Just in case you weren't aware, just in case you couldn't feel it, Pesach begins tonight. To the surprise of many, I know, yeah. With it being such a home-based festival at which we typically gather around the Seder table with our loved ones, there was a story from my family and my childhood that I kept thinking of this week. My mum tells me that when I was around 3 years old, we were at my grandparents' for Seder, and it came time to usher in Elijah. According to my mother, I followed after my grandmother, eager to help her open the door to welcome in his prophetic presence. So we opened the door, and trying to do the very Pesach thing of engaging the small child in the rituals of the holiday, my gran turns to me and says, "Where's Elijah?" I, in my confusion because it sounded to my toddler ears like my name, Eliza, turned to her and exclaimed, "I'm here." So now, a fair number of years later, and perhaps a little bit wiser, I'm arguably much better equipped to learn about and question this mythical figure of Eliyahu Hanavi. Most of the stories and biblical references related to Elijah take place in the 2 books of Kings. Hailing from the town of Tishbe in the northern kingdom of Israel, during the reign of King Ahav, we can place him in the 9th century BCE. Living in a world in which the Israelites were led astray, induced to worship foreign deities, Elijah faces an uphill battle as he struggles to make the Israelites heed his call. Elijah's defining moment comes as he summons the people to Mount Carmel and challenges the other prophets to offer a sacrifice without the use of fire. When they are, of course, unsuccessful, Elijah offers his own sacrifice, which is consumed by our God, the God of Israel. And for a moment, the Israelites declare their renewed faith in the one true God. This faith is short-lived, however, and Elijah is chased into the desert, where he encounters God not through the wind or the earthquake or the fire that God sends, but rather the still, small voice found in the calm that follows. Nonetheless, this direct encounter with the divine does not restore Elijah, and unable to continue as a prophet, he seeks out Elisha to be his successor. When his time on earth is done, Elijah does not die, but is swept up famously by a fiery chariot which carts him away to the heavens. This curiosity surrounding his story has meant Elijah has captured the imaginations of not just small children growing up in 1990s Australia, but Jews across the millennia that have followed his tale. Our rabbis have many stories that highlight their connection to Elijah the prophet, and I wanted to share but 3 of them with you today. 1. In the Talmud, in Tractate Brachot, Rabbi Yossi recounts, "I was once walking along the road when I entered the ruins of an old abandoned building among the ruins of Jerusalem in order to pray. I noticed that Elijah came and guarded the entrance and waited until I finished my prayer. When I finished praying and exited the ruin, Elijah said to me deferentially as one would address a rabbi, 'Greetings to you, my rabbi.' I answered him, 'Greetings to you, my rabbi, my teacher.' And Elijah said to me, 'Why did you enter this ruin?' I responded, 'To pray.' And Elijah said back, 'You should have prayed on the road.' And I said, 'I was unable to pray along the road because I was afraid that I might be interrupted by travelers and would be unable to focus.' Elijah then says, 'You should have recited the abbreviated prayer which we have for just such circumstances.' So in other words, Elijah comes across as a protective presence, a figure who watched over his students and who has firm notions about what is right and what is wrong and how things should be done. At baseline, the figure of Elijah was a teacher, someone who would guide our ancient rabbis and show them the way, sometimes literally. Elijah was the figure that they turned to help them see what they might be missing or might not have considered, and to help them know what they didn't know. Put simply, Elijah, like any good teacher, was a mirror. Number 2. In possibly my favorite rabbinic story, which is found in Tractate Bava Metzia, Rabbi Eliezer constantly brings forward solid halachic arguments, but his fellow sages never accept any of them. After failing and failing again to convince his colleagues, Rabbi Eliezer said to them, "If I am right, this carob tree will prove it." The carob tree is uprooted and moves many cubits from its place. The rabbis say to him, "The carob tree doesn't prove anything." Rabbi Eliezer then says to them, "If I'm right, this stream of water will prove it." The water in the stream turns backwards and begins flowing in the opposite direction. The rabbi said to him, "This stream doesn't prove anything." Rabbi Eliezer then said to them, "If I'm right, then the walls of the Beit Midrash, the study hall, will prove it." The walls of the Beit Midrash lean inwards and begin to fall. Rabbi Yehoshua scolds the walls and says to them, "If Torah scholars are arguing, why are you intervening?" Out of deference to both rabbis, the walls neither cave in nor stay standing straight, and instead they remain leaning. Rabbi Eliezer then says to them, "If I am right, heaven will prove it." A divine voice emerged from the heavens and says, "Why are you arguing with Rabbi Eliezer, as the halakha agrees with him in every place?" Rabbi Yehoshua stands on his feet and declares, "Lo b'shamayim hi," it is not in the heaven. Years after, Rabbi Natan encounters Elijah and says to him, "What did the Holy One do at that time when Rabbi Yehoshua issued that declaration way back then?" Elijah said to him, "The Holy One smiled and said, 'Nitzchuni banai,' my children have triumphed over me. My children have triumphed over me." This tale adds an extra layer of our understanding of Elijah. Elijah is still a teacher and interlocutor, yep, but he's also the model of a particularly rabbinic style of learning. He stays as a guide on the side, only approached towards the end of the passage. To me, this indicates that even if Elijah was not at the forefront or the main character, Elijah is still listening carefully, so that when the rabbis do ultimately come to him, he can respond appropriately. Additionally, through his gentle smile, he gives the rabbis permission to debate matters of halakha, and not only to debate, but to question. Through his gentle smile, Elijah is equally the one who validates the idea that a halachic argument must stand on firm ground. With Rabbi Yehoshua's quote, "It is not in the heavens," coming from the book of Deuteronomy. One must have proof to hold up their argument. Moreover, Elijah is the one who teaches us that argument and debate for the sake of heaven is permissible, but must be built on respect. He appears only after several years have passed, once the frustration of his predecessors has lowered from a boil to a simmer. Then, and only then, as the walls of the Beit Midrash have stayed leaning for some time, is he able to describe God's reaction. Then and only then is he able to remind us of the forest for the trees, that debate and argument can even be healthy in the right, respectful circumstances. The walls stay leaning in acknowledgement of both rabbis, after all. Machlochet, debate, Elijah is conveying, should therefore always serve the goal of strengthening our studies and our relationships, that we may be able to transmit Torah to the next generation. Then, and only then, Elijah reminds us, "Nitzchuni banai," my children had triumphed over me. This brings us to number 3. In Tractate Sanhedrin, Rabbi Joshua ben Levi meets Elijah and asks him, "When will the Messiah come?" The prophet answered, "Go and ask him. He sits at the entrance to the city, among the poor and the lepers." The rabbi asked, "How will I recognize him?" And Elijah replied, "The lepers untie all of the bandages at once and rebandage each separately, while he, the Messiah, unties and rebandages each separately, thinking, 'Should it come time for me to reveal myself, I must not be delayed.' So Rabbi Joshua went to the place and greeted him, 'Peace be upon you, master and teacher.' And the Messiah replied, 'Peace be upon you, son of Levi.' 'When will you come?' asked Rabbi Joshua. And he replied, 'Today.' Rabbi Joshua returned to meet Elijah, and the prophet asked, 'So what did he say to you?' And the rabbi said, 'Surely he was joking with me, for he said he would come today, and yet he has not.' And Elijah the prophet answered him, 'This is what he said to you. I will come today if you hear my voice. The Messiah is waiting to be called.'" In just that final phrase, "the Messiah is waiting to be called," we encapsulate much of the magic and mysticism surrounding our prophetic protagonist, who himself, as we heard chanted so beautifully from the book of Malachi, Elijah is often believed to be the Messiah, or at the very least a harbinger thereof. Whilst we as Reformed Jews do not believe in a physical, human-like Messiah, that's a sermon for another time, Elijah, in one fell swoop, powerfully teaches us that a piece of the Messiah can be found within each of us. This messianic spark, Elijah is saying, is the piece of us that doesn't need to wait to take action to help others or to make the world a better place, to make it more perfect. The messianic spark, Elijah implies, is the piece of us that isn't waiting for someone else to take the first step to create a better tomorrow. We too can play our own special and unique part if only we listen to the still, small voice. In our time, Elijah is not just part of the Jewish past, but the Jewish present. He accompanies our newborn baby boys as we welcome them into the covenant, in the hopes that this child will represent our messianic hopes for the future. He accompanies us as we usher out Shabbat, as we pray that this week will be one of joy, of gladness, of peace, and yes, redemption. He accompanies us at the Seder table as we celebrate the festival of freedom and redemption. How lucky are we then that we have this fortuitous coincidence of Havdalah and Seder this evening. May we be doubly blessed this Pesach by the spirit of Elijah, the teacher, the mirror, the interlocutor, and our model for making miracles by our own hands and bringing redemption into our own day and age. May we all soon be able to say, "He's here." Shabbat Shalom and Chag Pesach Sameach.